Hello and welcome. I would like to welcome Woody Zidgali to the podcast, who is a sports physiotherapist. Woody, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. I like the backdrop there. I've been in that room before. Whereabouts are you today?
Yeah, so we're at our clinic. It's Altius Healthcare in Hale, in Cheshire. Yeah, and as you said, nice big room, as opposed to the little box rooms you sometimes get in our clinics.
No, very nice spot. For anyone who's not been there, I'd recommend checking it out. It's in a lovely part of the world in Hale. So what's on the agenda for you today, Woody?
I've just come off the back of a nice busy clinic. So first patient at 7:30 this morning, and straight through. And yeah, normal Monday for me. Mondays are usually pretty busy, back to back here in Hale.
Great stuff. Now I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about you. So I know that you've had extensive experience in elite sport as well as in private clinics. But in terms of you, you've got one of the more interesting names that we've had on here. So this is what is the background of that?
Yeah, sure. So it's a really mixed background. We could spend half a podcast talking about my background, but my dad's from Middle East. He's from Bahrain, which is where the surname is actually Omani, but it's Arab. And my mum's from the States, actually, and I was born in Glasgow, which is so round that way. But I've been up here since about 15 or so. So I consider myself from Manchester, really. And but yeah, it's my first name is actually Darwood, hence Woody. But I've been called Woody since I was 2 years old by my parents, so it's much easier for people to remember, I think.
So what is your links with that Bahrain and the US then? Do you have much dealings
Just
with
family,
it?
yeah, just family over there. I've got an American passport. Once upon a time, I thought I'd want to live over there. That's probably changed over the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, lots of family Middle East, and we go out here and there. But no, I'm sort of British through and through, really. And my dad's actually working in the Middle East at the minute, and has been for a few years. So there's been opportunities to go out to the UAE and do some work. But young family, sort of wanting to keep us grounded here for a while.
So what are your thoughts? I know it's a different territory in Saudi, but like, what are your thoughts on the development of the Premier League over there? Because that's been an incredible story over the last few years, but particularly football recently.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's two sides to it, and I think it just depends on where you are in the world and the sort of culture you come from as to how you think about it. I think more broadly and sort of less thinking about the morals, but objectively, I expect things to go really well over there. I don't expect it to be similar to what we saw with the Chinese trying to develop a bit of a boom over there with football. When they start to throw money at things, the sort of Gulf states tend to stick it through and end up doing things well. You've only got to look at Dubai as a project to become a destination where people travel to. So I was curious. I think that you could see that end up being the biggest football league outside of Europe in the world in sort of 5-6 years time. And then there's another, like you said, there's another discussion around the kind of, people like to talk about things like sports washing and the kind of the more moral side of things. And, I have some thoughts on them, and I it's really difficult. I think it's an area where, we like to present things as black and white these days and in short little snippets and things that fit into tweets. And I think most things are some shade of grey. And, there are elements there of laws that I would consider objectively wrong, and there's elements of the way we react to that in the West which seems a little bit hypocritical, given the way that we'll sometimes turn a blind eye to other things. So I think, again, we could probably talk for hours on that subject, and it would very much probably be two people that don't know much about what they're talking about, just sharing opinions.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with the binary thing, because that in so many things, that's definitely a different podcast. But there's so many things where it's like, if you do that, that's wrong. If you do that, you're perfect, which I fundamentally disagree with as well. Yeah, no, that's interesting to get that. So then, in terms of you, then, so you said you ended up was it in Manchester when you were about 15?
Yeah, that's it. So my dad, and we'll probably get on to how I got into the profession, but my dad's he's a doctor, and he was at med school in Glasgow, which is how I was born there. then he kind of worked through in Scotland. We moved down to England when I was about 9. He did his 5 years worth of rotations on the road to becoming a consultant, and got his consultancy post at Withenshaw Hospital here in Manchester. And that's how we then stayed put. And he ended up sort of later down the line sort of headhunted for a role in Abu Dhabi, which he ended up accepting, and that's how my parents sort of moved out there.
Right. Okay. And then, yes, so what was your link into, I know the medical profession might have been from your dad, but why physio?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up thinking I was supposed to do medicine. Like that was always the thing, right? You're the eldest son of a doctor. You know, some of your first words are things like appendix, because he was his little experiment whilst he was in med school, and it was probably him that talked me away from doing it more than anything at the back end. And I had this opportunity to go and play sport at university, and to do that, I had to do a sports science degree, and his attitude was always, you're young, go do something you enjoy, and if you still want to do something different after, you can always go and do it. And in that sort of 3 years during my sports science degree, which I did in Cardiff, I mean, sport had always been my whole life, and I became really focused on maybe working in sport in some manner, and physio seemed like a nice sort of middle ground, really. I became very interested in sort of strength and conditioning, became my passion in those 3 years, and did as much as I could helping out with teams and sort of and trying to get as much experience in that area. And then I had a decision to make, which would have looked like graduate physio, which would have been 2 years coming away with a master's, or 4 more years of studying, doing graduate medicine, and then, you know, still having a lot of work to do before, you know, you're really in a place where you're sort of earning. And, you know, I just felt like physio made the most sense. It felt like it gave me the best opportunity to work with athletes. You know, docs tend to have very bit part roles. There's very few full-time doctors in sport. And so I went about it that way. And did that at Manchester Metropolitan, did my physio masters.
Right. Oh yeah. No. It's, do you know? I remember I went for had a meeting there, and I was trying to sell them some equipment or something. And is it Abibor Johannes? Was it him there?
Yes. Yeah. He was one of the researchers, like the research methods deliverer, I think.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned it before on here, but like he flipped it on me and was trying to get me to sign up to do the masters in that, and I thought this wasn't what I was meant to be doing in this meeting. But I always remember it anyway. And so, what sports science? Did you have an idea of what you wanted your profession to be at that point, or was it always going to be like a pathway into medicine? Or
yeah, no, it was go do something you know you'll enjoy, and that you basically have no chance of doing badly at here because you enjoy it so much. And you know, my life growing up was sport, and it seemed logical to go and do that. You know, the goal was to go and play sport and enjoy it for 3 years, but also study something where, you know, you weren't going to have to work too hard to enjoy, essentially. And I did want it to be a science-based degree as well, just so I still had the option to then go push on into further study around a science-based vocational subject, really.
yeah. And so, within that, then, so did you have a particular area that you like? Because sports science is such a massive field of, you know, whether it's anatomy, physiology, psychology, there's a huge area of it.
Yeah. So my sort of majors were physiology and biomechanics, and then and performance analysis I enjoyed as well, which was probably the least kind of sort of physiology, biology based subject that I did. But yeah, it was very much physiology, it was biomechanics. It was stuff that would make me better at what I was doing from a sports point of view. It was the stuff I was really interested in. I mean, I liked it all. You obviously do a lot of all of it in your first year, don't you? And I generally found everything interesting. But yeah, and physiology and biomechanics leaned on my strength. I mean, my A levels were sort of maths, mechanics, biology, sports science, you know, so it leaned into what I was already stronger at academically.
Yeah, and then so on the sports science side, what opportunities were there around then in terms of what you may go into? Was there that much infrastructure?
I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but you know, when I think about all of my friends from university who did sports-based degrees, because over there in Cardiff is one big campus of people all doing sports-based courses, and essentially it's just where they put all their athletes. And I don't know any. There's maybe one or two that work in a related field. Most of them went and did something completely different. You know, I remember back then there was always, you know, could you go and do a strength and conditioning masters maybe? But you know, I still think there's not many jobs that are in sports science, right? It's an interesting subject, people enjoy it, but you know, and again, you've got to really want to do it, because it's not particularly lucrative either. Your opportunities to work with elite athletes and get paid anything like what would be considered fair for it are few and far between. Or you can go into teaching, you know, or you can go and continue to do further study, which a few people go and do, but it's a tough one. You know, I know a lot of people go into subjects where they're just picking the subject they enjoy. They have no idea what they want to do, and I generally think that's a pretty good idea when you're that age. The idea you've got to commit to what you want to do for the rest of your life, and know that you're going to enjoy it, and make that decision when you're 16, 17 is ridiculous, really. You know, I think it's probably why, you know, we'll get onto this, but it's why I think, you know, a lot of people aren't particularly good at what they do. And, you know, people don't set high standards for themselves, because how can you expect someone to still be passionate about or everyone to still be passionate about what they do 30 years after they decided they wanted to do it? You know, when they've changed as a person and they've gone through, you know, they've gone through everything they've gone through. You know, I think for people to be good at their job, they've generally got to enjoy it. And, you know, that's a hard thing to know when you're 16, 17, because I think back to when I was 16, 17, and I was an idiot. So I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do for a living.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that as well. And what sport was your main one then?
I played everything. I did absolutely everything. My main sport, if I had to pick one, was tennis. That was probably the sport I was best at. It's what I went to university to play. I played football as well, but really I went to play tennis. And then I barely picked up a racket since I finished that first degree. I was completely done with it, and football sort of became my main sport. And I do, you know, if there was another sport now, it's Thai boxing. Which, yeah, it's not as easy to get good at a sport that you pick up in your late 20s, and it's a particularly punishing one to be bad at, but I do enjoy it. But yeah, football's kind of been the sport that I've never got bored of, but, you know, anything that had a racket, anything that had a ball, you know, from when I was a kid up until I was 18, I did it.
And so when you decided to do the physio masters, again, was that something that was that a considered thing? Were there other things that you were thinking, or was it pretty much medicine or physio?
So that was it. I after I'd graduated, I had considerations about could you move laterally into a completely different career. But before that, it was those two things. And you know, I think with physio, like you go into, you know, if you do your work, you know, you don't go into an interview pretending that sports your life and saying that all you want to do is sports physiotherapy, because they won't give you a place, because people that don't do the research come in and say that, right? Obviously, sports physiotherapy, musculoskeletal physiotherapy is a tiny part of what the sort of profession is made up of, really. So I certainly pretended I was going in with an open mind. And I guess I was, you know, I really enjoy the medical stuff. I loved working in hospitals. I only ever did it on placements. But I've always enjoyed, it's a weird thing to say, I've always enjoyed being in hospitals. I've always felt comfortable in those spaces. And I enjoyed most aspects of it, maybe outside of community physiotherapy. But again, that's probably not because of the subject area. It's just you know, it can be the placement or the people you're with at the time. But I really loved the medical stuff. But I knew what I was good at. I knew what I was passionate about. And that was definitely MSK. And so I think that was always the way that things were going to go.
Yeah. And then, so when you're on there, then what sort of placements were you getting when you were doing your masters?
Yeah, so you'll do an MSK one, you'll do a respiratory one, you'll do something that's in the broader neurology areas. So that can be neurology, it can be neurosurgery, it could be stroke, and then you get different things. So I had a rheumatology placement. Rheumatology and hematology. You'll get community, you'll get intermediate care. There's lots of different areas that physios are placed around. I think it's something that broadly people aren't aware of. I'm sure everyone that tunes into this will be, but you know, people you'll turn up to see them and they're in hospital for XYZ, and you introduce yourself as a physio and they're confused as to why you're there. But obviously sort of chest management, mobility, all of these things are covered by physios. And but it was just never they were fine. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I was learning, but never anything where I thought this is definitely what I want to do.
And so what was your first role once you'd finished your masters?
Yeah, I was, in hindsight, I was really fortunate. So I was offered off the back of my last placement, which was rheumatology. They sort of said, I went traveling with my now wife. She also finished on the physio masters, so we traveled around Southeast Asia for 4 or 5 months, and then when we came back, they sort of said, let us know when you're back, we'll put you on bank. As soon as there's something permanent, you can come in. And I was like, great, here's a foot in. Everybody had always said at that point, even if you want to work in sport, go do your rotations, get some experience under your belt, get a feel for things, get some experience, start volunteering to do bits here and there, do some evenings, do some weekends, and then try and work your way into sport. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. And their HR department was taking forever to get me a start date. I was training over at Total Fitness in Wilmslow at the time, and I saw Jeff Ross finishing up with a patient and knew who he was, and thought, I'm gonna grab a hold of him and see if I can talk to him about working in sport. And him and Rob Harris brought me in to have a chat. It turned into an interview pretty quickly, and they were like, right, we want to give you a job. We have no idea what to do with you because we've never employed a graduate before, but we want you to work for us. Don't take the NHS role. So I was like, fine, great. Nothing was coming of that for a few weeks, and I was like, right, what's going on? And they had just taken over the medical contract at Widnes Vikings, who were in the Super League at the time, in Super League Rugby. They needed an academy physio, and they went, Woody, do you want to do this? And I was like, not really. That I didn't think this was what I was supposed to do. But at that point, I needed to work. I was like, fine. They were like, yep, go do it. It'll, they sold it to me. They're like, you'll work, there'll be some evenings, there'll be some weekends here and there, but it won't be too bad, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, straight away, I realized, I'm working 6 a.m. till 6 p.m, 7 days a week for 17.5 grand a year. And you're kind of like, right, this is tough. But I was into full-time sports straight away. I was in an elite sports environment. Whenever there wasn't a clash with academy, I was expected to be with first team. I was not ready to be in that environment. It's the standards were high, 3 or 4 physios, a couple of docs, you've got students in all the time, you've got 30 odd academy players, you've got 30 odd first team players, and you don't know what you're doing because you just graduated. Like all people who graduate don't know what they're doing. And so it was a quick learning process. And to be honest, probably 6 months through that season, I was thinking, I can't do this for another year. Like I wasn't really enjoying myself. I was learning, and I was learning fast, but I wasn't really enjoying myself. And at that point, the person who was the head academy physio and assistant in the first team, he handed his notice in, and they weren't going to replace him for the last 3 months of the season. So head physio at the time, Pete Talbot, he said to me, you're going to have to do it for 3 months. I said, great. I know that I've got no experience really, but I've got to do it for 3 months anyway. Would you consider it almost like an extended interview? I know you've got to speak to external applicants and stuff like that, but I'd just like you to know that I'd be interested. And in the end, they gave it to me, and all of a sudden your hours almost half and your salary almost doubles, and things are much more enjoyable. And again, found myself in a position that I probably wasn't. In fact, I definitely wasn't ready to be in. And probably not even from a skill point of view, probably just from a maturity point of view. Either the way I carried myself, or I didn't know any different, right? So in hindsight, you're extremely fortunate to be in a position like that. I had no reference point to understand how much better it was to work there than it would have been to be in a clinic or to be in a hospital, and so probably took it for granted to some extent on reflection. But yeah, that's how I ended up sort of in professional sport and straight off the bat. And it certainly, the rate at which I developed was brilliant because of it. But I dread to think how good or bad people thought of me sort of at the time or reflection, because I didn't know what I was doing.
So you touched on it there. So is that from a clinical standpoint, knowledge as well? Like how did that manifest? Because you said before that even when they offered you the job, you were questioning it.
Yeah, and I think that was it. And I think the person who was supervising me at the time, who was sort of heading up the academy, like, I wasn't considering myself fortunate to have walked straight into a job like that, when there are people who have to do loads of work before they get a job like that. And, I can imagine how that, if you got that sense of me, how you would then have perceived me at the time. And yeah, it wasn't so much clinically, because you've got this good team of experienced physios around you, and they're casting an eye over things all the time. And the reason that you learn quickly in those environments is not because it's this ridiculous standard around you, or because everyone in physio who works in pro sport is so good at what they do. It worked for us there because you had a treatment room with a load of beds in it, everybody working in the same room together, everybody talking over the players together, what they're doing, everyone's in the gym together. So you're constantly around everybody doing different things, inputting on what you're doing, asking your opinion on things. That's one thing Pete was great for, is that he'd ask my opinion of things, and he didn't need to know what I thought of it. He knew what he was going to do, but he wanted me to have a look at things. And he'd even take things that I said and put them in, even though he didn't really need to, but as long as he was doing what he knew needed to be done, he did it. And it meant that I got to develop really, really quickly. It's something I've always been really, really grateful for, and something I've always tried to take on when I've then gone on to teach people is that, like, get their input, value their input, show them you value it, and have them involved in decision making, and be really, really open about clinical discussion, because physios are a seriously insecure group of people, and they often don't like to talk to other physios about, or ask questions about what that person would do, for fear of being perceived as not knowing what they're doing. But what was great about that environment is we had that really, really open discussion. I think it's the only reason that I got better at my job quickly.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective on it. You can see, certainly in elite sport, there's not many jobs, and there's a lot of people that would want it. So it probably does foster that experience. Do you think is it worse in elite sport than private, or what are your thoughts on that?
In what sense?
In terms of the physios, like just being a bit more conscious of not wanting to expose themselves. Like,
no, I think it's physios full stop. It might be. I think that certainly the good environments that I've worked in haven't been like that. But I think it's physios in general. It might be different in the NHS. It might. I can't say what teams of people are like in there, because I only have my experience as a student. Privately, the difficulty is that you're in a little room on your own, back to back with patients all day. There's rarely crossover with the other physios, so your ability to have open clinical discussion, you have this problem in private healthcare, which is that what you should be doing, running a clinic, is having your clinicians come together here and there, but then you have people employed, people who are consulting, who pays for that. Do you pay for their time? Any time taken out to do that kind of clinical development work is time that they could be seeing a patient and making money for you. And so you end up in this place where a lot of places don't do it. And so that's one of the barriers to it. But I do think that, more broadly, people don't like to have really open, vulnerable clinical discussion with each other for fear of what other people will think of them. Good teams do it, though. Good teams do it.
Yeah, why do you think that is then? Like,
I think it's similar in all walks of life, really. I mean, people don't like to seem like they don't know what they're doing. But like I said, it can just be seeming. It can just be seeming. That doesn't have to be the case. Like me coming to you and saying, I'm doing such and such, came in with X, Y, Z. I did this with her. This seemed to happen, and I've asked her to do these things, and I'm going to see what's happening in a week's time. Would you do anything different with that? That for me is just a good discussion, right? And me trying to see if I can get anything from you, regardless of whether I'm more senior in terms of experience than you or not. And I personally don't see any reason that shouldn't be done more regularly. In my experience, it isn't done. And I think it's a security thing. I think it's a security thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And then, so how long were you witness for?
I think 5 seasons. So I at some point I moved into a lead physio role, did that, and then witness got relegated from Super League, and for various reasons, that was the right time for me to move on. I think it would have been difficult to have stayed with kind of a reduction in resources, both from staffing, financially, and then have a group of players who are used to a certain standard being delivered that you might not be able to deliver anymore, given what's available to you. And it was around that time, for the couple of years prior to that, I'd started working with individual athletes on the side here and there, particularly in fight sports. And at that time, I knew that Doug Jones had just opened Altius here, and I knew about his background, and he was at Harrison Ross at the time that I got employed through Witness through them, and knew that he worked with a lot of athletes, and my wife and I were going to be having a kid, and my feeling was that I didn't want to be working in sport when I had children. I wanted to get to a place where I could potentially work with athletes, but have a bit more of a settled routine. And fortunately, Doug was happy to have me here, and things got moving from there, but just in more of a clinical setting.
So in terms of Altius, then it's got a reputation, and well, factually, it's got some really well-rounded clinicians, all worked in sport. It's quite a it's a well-known team, whether it's Alex O'Gorman or you, and obviously Doug himself. Was that what do you see as the culture in that? I know you've not worked in loads of different practices, but that seems like that was something that fitted with what you were looking to do.
Yeah. So I got chatting to Doug, and we're remarkably similar in how we think about the profession. Differences in how we practice, but how we think about it is very, very similar. And that was the thing that sort of drew me to it, which was essentially, we have learned that the way that we practice in sport fixes people quickly. Why would we not do those exact same things with everybody else, right? There are adjustments that you have to make, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion about the differences between the two areas. But, that's the reason that people like coming here. They get delivered, or they certainly have the opportunity to have a gold standard service delivered to them based on whatever their resources. And we treat everybody the same. And I think that's really important. I think kind of, the reason, so sport is the area in which this profession, sports medicine, has the most resource allocated to it, right? And so the way that things are done there are likely to be the best practices to get people pain-free and functioning. And so why wouldn't you do that? Now, part of the thing here, the people that work here have all had experience working in sport, so they understand that. And the ones that haven't worked in full-time sport generally are juniors that have come through and then trained directly under us and learn to practice in the way that we do. And I think people like to have that, they come in, they can tell, we make it fairly obvious that we've worked in sport with what's up on the walls. And but that it's not just sort of our backgrounds and the way we approach things clinically. I think generally that the people that are sort of well known here, it's the people skills, it's that side of things. When I consider what I think is important in this profession, it's the people skills way over the clinical side of things. Everybody gets good clinically after a period of time, provided that they care about what they do. That comes. I think the thing that separates the good clinicians is that people side of things, because you can be as good as you want clinically. If you can't impact people or help them understand things, then it doesn't matter, right? Think about the main complaint about medical professions is, poor bedside manner, or coming out of an appointment having no idea what's going on or what the plan is. The person that has been in there as the clinician could be an outstanding clinician. They could be brilliant. But if that side's missing, there's just, you're not going to get that across to the patient, and so it won't matter.
So can you give a bit more insight into what those people's skills may look like? Are there any specific things that you think?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when I'm kind of either mentoring or training people, one of the first sets of things that I look at are leadership skills, and the different categories within that. So that includes communication, emotional intelligence, influence, these things, sort of motivational speaking, ideas around behavioral change and how those other skills there impact that, because those are things that I don't think we do a great job of putting structured and objective learning in place for. We do it quite well clinically, the people that take their clinical development seriously and they set goals and they set targets, they make them objective, they review them. But we don't tend to do that with the soft skill side of things. So that's something that I'm always really keen to do with people, and it's point them into the direction of resource for those things, send them away. For example, I'll generally start people with basic personality testing and learning style preferences so that they can start to get to grips with how they are in those areas, but then have a reference point for how they think about those things in other people. Because if you're not identifying personality types in people quickly, or perhaps preferences for their ways of learning, you're not going to adapt your communication to them in a way that suits them best, or help set them targets in ways that are sort of accessible for them from a learning point of view. So that's the sort of stuff that I'll start people with really, really early, alongside clinical objectives, particularly if they're early in their career. But my experience tells me now, particularly having worked privately, that that's the stuff that matters most to helping people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really interesting. Which personality tests do you tend to favour?
I can't remember. I've got a load of links saved on my laptop. There's some that are really extensive that sort of you have to pay for, and there's some that are actually really good as introductory things for that are free of charge. We've not talked about it. We probably don't need to go. We might do, but I had a leadership role in Bupa for a few years that was both operational and clinical, and we used to, as a team of managers, do some extensive personality testing ourselves through an external company, and that stuff's great, but that's not necessarily the extent that I'll go to when I'm introducing this stuff, these concepts to people, because a lot of people as well are naturally good at this stuff and they'll pick it up. They just haven't thought about it consciously before.
Yeah. So yeah, talk to me about that role, the operational role.
Yeah, just during what happened during COVID, we just had a baby. Clinics are closed for a bit. Bupa have a large first contact triage service that's remote. It's a huge service, 2-3 million in revenue each year. Sort of tens of thousands of patients go through the service, sort of 50-60 either advanced practice clinicians or sort of senior MSK clinicians, sort of commensurate with an FCP role, I guess. It's entirely remote, and so they were advertising. I thought this was just a nice, safe thing to pick up because we had no idea what was going to happen. So I started doing that a few days a week. And very very soon after that, the person who was leading the team that I'd gone into was leaving. I ended up getting the role as sort of the team lead, and that's a split operational and clinical role. So it's clinical management and then operational from the business side. And the reason I wanted to do it, again, not exactly in my area of passion, but I wanted exposure to how sort of large medical practice works within big companies, because elite sport is a different thing, right? It just, the way that you practice, the way that you go about things, it doesn't represent what happens in the real world, really. So I wanted exposure to that. I wanted to get good at the operational side of things, the business side of the profession, as well as being able to continue to clinically develop people, and did that for 3 years, and then 2 days clinical alongside that at Altius, and then just about 8 weeks ago now I moved back to 5 days clinical, so I've finished that role there now.
Right. How did you find doing that sort of management style?
I love people managing. it's probably the area now that I enjoy the most is developing people. But I working within large businesses, lots of different stakeholders, things move slower than you want them to, red tape here and there, lots of sort of fingers in the pie. It was great learning experience for me, and I did learn a lot, particularly around people management, some really good opportunities, but it always had an end date for me. It was very much kind of until you feel like, once you feel like you're not developing any further from this, you'll probably look to move on, and that's where I got to. But it was really interesting. I developed a lot of new skill. Just certainly wasn't going to be something for me long term.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good to get out your comfort zone sometimes and do some diverse setup. We use, in terms of personality tests, we've been using Gallup, so the Clifton Strengths test for the last few years, and I really like it because it's got, I think it's 34 different personality types, and then you're allocated, you're given 5 that are your main strengths.
Yeah.
And the idea being that you then use those skills rather than trying to coach your weaknesses or your lesser ones. You really embrace the skills that you've got. So I really like it because it's that I'm a big believer in like positive. Yeah, we do that. Let's move forward. Let's lean into the strengths of people rather than trying to make everyone the same in terms of what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So then I know that you, when we were chatting at the clinic, and you've done quite a lot of work in combat sports. How did that come about?
Yeah, I've sort of done it for a while now. Like I said, it goes back to my time when I was working in rugby, and again, it was me just chancing my arm, similar to the way I ended up in rugby. So I've been following MMA for a long time. I was a big fan of the sport. It quickly became my favorite sport, and one of my favorite fighters was someone called Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who has fought for a UFC title twice in Madison Square Garden. He's I think 58-0 professional kickboxer. He's been in the sort of top 5 or so of the UFC welterweights for probably 8 or 9 years now, and he was going to be fighting in Liverpool, and obviously with this being close by, I was like, right, let's chance my arm. Messaged his dad, who's his manager, told him who I was, what I could do, just offered that what to help out as soon as they landed for fight week and stuff, and what I could provide. Was happy to do it free of charge. Just wanted to help out, and they ended up taking me up on it, only because he'd forgotten to travel, I think, with his multivitamins, and wanted to know if I could get hold of some that were kind of going to be fine for drug testing. And I was like, yeah, went down and met them, and then spent every single day with them all fight week, and that gave me a real foot into it, because to be able to say you've worked with someone of that caliber very quickly brings people around to, oh well, he'd be great to work with then. And so it just snowballs from there. And once I was involved with Altius, we've had boxers come through here, we've had other fighters come through here, and you start to meet more and more people, and very quickly things started to sort of open up. And there's a Manchester-based fighter who's undefeated called Lerone Murphy. He's in UFC, and ahead of his first UFC fight, he was struggling to get some imaging done through his GP. He needed an MRI. He's actually got some bullet shrapnel in his tongue, so his GP wouldn't send them for one. I had a quick chat with Andy Dunn, who's a consultant radiologist that said this should be fine. It's old, fibros, surely no issues here. He was like, yeah, no issues, get him through. So I got all this testing sorted for him, which you have to do when you join an organisation. And his first fight was going to be in Abu Dhabi, just where my dad's living. So I went out there with them. Again, spent fight week with them, a few of the boys from Manchester, his head coach as well, and it was just networking through there, and all of a sudden that then opened up sort of floodgates to people being aware of who I was and wanting to come see me and things like that. So done plenty with fighters, and obviously having worked in gyms and stuff like that as well, and as in kind of trained in gyms, I should say, it's just brought a lot of opportunity to work with athletes from a sport that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, that's great. So how big is that community over here at the moment? I know UFC is really growing, but how many physios working in the fight game are there?
there's some here and there. It tends to be clinic based again, unless you are even the richest fighters in the world, they're not going to have full-time medical staff, right? So you are generally, right, they might bring someone in for a camp, for example, but it's not going to be 365 days a year. So there's lots of people who will do bits. The problem is, as with all professional sport, and obviously there's this huge misconception about the amount of money in sport, there's hardly any money in sport, right? There's lots of money in a few sports at the very, very top end, but the rest of sport, there's hardly anything, right? So that's where then it becomes what you tend to find, which you find this with a lot of sports, particularly individual sports, is that you have the people who start to work with lots of, say, fighters, for example, are people who are trying to build their reputation because they're happy to do it for free, right? And that's been my experience of things, is that you'll see a lot of that, and there are some who are very, very good, but as in with most pro sport, the level of clinician that's working in there, they're often on their own, they're relatively newly qualified, they're working evenings for 20 quid, going down and covering training, or they're doing 15-minute massages for a fiver, or that sort of thing. And it's just the reality of most of professional sport, and fight sports, really there is hardly any money in it at all. Even at UFC level, most of those guys barely make enough money, and most of them have to find other ways of making money. So it becomes accessing high level clinical care difficult unless they absolutely have to. I mean, what's nice about the UFC is that they will cover any injuries you pick up in a fight, so that's where you can then go in and you can go see your sports medicine consultant, you can get all your imaging done, you can get referred out to your consultants, get your surgeries, those sorts of things. But other than that, it's difficult for the fighters to make ends meet, and then they've got to find some way of trying to get better, and it tends to not be a gold standard approach that they end up taking because of that.
Yeah. So what were the best experiences you had of being in Abu Dhabi or working with Wonderboy? Or
it's I think that being at there's still nothing like being at the fights. I struggle watching people I know fight. Like I get ridiculously nervous. And so you remember that energy. I think to be fair, Larone's first fight was brilliant because you had this guy come in against a very sort of well-known. So you'll have heard of Habib Nurmagomedov. His maybe cousin or something like that, or one of his very best mates, who was very, very big prospect. Lerone was coming in on a few weeks' notice to fight him, given no chance at all, gets dropped in the first round, and ends up winning the next 2 rounds, and it ends up being scored a draw. And he was the person at the end of the fight who was looking good. And just to see someone from Manchester come in undefeated early in his career, go and do that. It's his friends that are in his corner as well as his coach, and to sort of come away with something like that and then start to build a name for himself was really, really cool. But I love the young. It's the young athletes and fighters as well, but it's the young athletes that I enjoy working with the most. That's the stuff I like, seeing them work hard and then start to build through their careers. And there's a few young amateur boxers and a young pro boxer by the name of Khalil Majid, who just signed with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing and fought in Birmingham for him on Saturday night and won, and he's undefeated, and he's just come back from a bicep rupture that I sort of rehabbed him through. So those sorts of things are the things that are really rewarding for me. Those sort of younger athletes who are looking to make a name for themselves.
And so what do you see the future for you then? Like, what are the things that you want to get involved in?
So I actually really enjoy the general population work as well as the elite sports stuff. I'm really fortunate to have a nice balance of that, and I probably want that to stay as it is, to be honest. I think clinically the stuff that interests me most is working with athletes, but I really, really enjoy for me, I just see everything as athletic development, regardless of who the person is, and that's the stuff I'm really, really passionate about. My most enjoyable sessions are the people that stay on with me for S&C work after they've rehabbed their injury, and I'm seeing them once a week and seeing them turn into people who are high-level athletes, whether they're in their 40s or not, from someone who could barely walk through the clinic door initially, because that's generally the most rewarding stuff to me. If I'm finding myself smiling in the day, it's watching somebody do something who 99 out of 100 people couldn't do, that comes through the door in tears because their back's that bad when you first meet them. And so I'm really happy where I am. I've done some consultancy work with clubs, and I enjoy that. Because it's a little bit less demanding. I can still enjoy my family life and sort of see things from afar a little bit, and help put structures in place. That's been really enjoyable. But we've got a really good thing here, and so I'm probably not in any rush to move away from that. I think if I was single and didn't have kids, I'd probably still be in full-time sport. But I'm very fortunate to feel like I've got the best of both worlds with the number of athletes that come here to us in clinic. It's a good spot.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then last question then. So what would your advice be for people that are looking to get into working in the world of rehab sports medicine? What would you say to them?
Yeah, commit early. So commit when you're younger, because you have the time to just go and do it. You won't have priced yourself out of the pay that's involved at those points. It's very difficult for people who have been working for 8-9 years, getting a salary in the NHS, to then go and try and get involved in elite sport, because you've got to do so much evening and weekend work for pennies to develop enough of a reputation to get opportunities. Again, early on, if this is being aimed at people who are younger, it's turn up early, leave late, say yes to everything that's asked of you. Don't ask the same question more than once, and you'll be fine. When we're looking at young people coming in and we're recruiting, whether that's for clubs or not, particularly at those entry level jobs, I'm not interested how good you are clinically. I want to see that you've got a basic understanding of things. It's the personality that I want to see. I want to see that you're going to have those things that are essentially a prerequisite for being good in sport, and that's not just the clinical side. In fact, I'd say it's predominantly the other side of things. So, because you'll get good because you'll see that you'll just be doing that many contact hours that you have no choice but to get good. So it's really about that effort early on in your career, but put it in. If I've got a student that turns up here and they look people in the eye and they say hello, they introduce themselves by name to all my patients, they ask questions at appropriate times, they show they're interested, that's someone I'm already earmarking for. Look, can we get them in the door here as a graduate and start working with them? And if I've got someone who comes in and they're checking their phone and they're not paying attention and they're asking if they can leave early and they're not getting here before the first patient, I'll have a conversation with them, and if that changes, fine. But if it doesn't, that they're going to struggle in those sorts of environments, because they're a lot more cutthroat than all the other working environments you see, sort of, whether that's NHS or private clinics.
Yeah, no, I think it's good advice for any walk of life, isn't it? Really, just be fully engaged and be fully present, involved in it. Woody, really appreciate you sharing your story and the different insights that you've had throughout your career, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, good, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Woody. See you soon.
Bye-bye.